Welcome back for Section 21, where, as we see in our title, we're going to provide an introduction to 19 CFR, that Code of Federal Regulations, where import regs are found. In general terms, and this is the CFR definition, the Code of Federal Regulations is a codification of the general and permanent rules published in the Federal Register by the executive departments and agencies of the federal government. Some legalese there. Once again, we're not lawyers, but can bring a little bit of light to some of these meetings. Codification is really the publication in writing of, as what we see here, permanent rules and regulations that were previously published and opened to public comment in the Federal Register. When they become permanent, these rules and regulations, they go into the Code of Federal Regulations. That's why import regs, which are certainly permanent, subject to change and update and such, but definitely permanent at a moment in time, are found in the Code of Federal Regulations. For our purposes, we're interested in 19 CFR. Second bullet, the code is divided into 50 titles, and each title is broken down by chapter, which carries the name of the issuing agency. We're going to see examples of all of this in just 1 second, specific to importing. From that chapter level, they can then be divided into parts. Second bullet, to give a broader sense of what we're talking about, customs regulations are found in 19 CFR, Chapter 1, Parts 0 through 140, and Parts 141 through 199. As we will see in an upcoming example, the full name given to these customs regs, as they're referred to in shorthand, is 19 CFR, Chapter 1, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Department of the Treasury. We have our title, we have our chapter, and we have the agencies or agency that is responsible for their enforcement. Customs and Border Protection as part of the Department of Homeland Security, but also the U.S. Department of the Treasury, because they're the ones that receive all the customs duties that are paid to the U.S. government. Moving along, each part within 19 CFR Chapter 1 addresses a specific topic and or list of requirements related to importing into the U.S. It's important that we understand the structure and nomenclature of 19 CFR, because really no one can be an expert on every single facet of importing into the United States. It would be great if we could, but more realistically, it's better to know where to look and under what headings we should be looking. In the age of the internet, we will note in Bullet 2, there are many ways in which to access 19 CFR. Back in the day, it was all hard copy stuff. Now, and we'll be seeing examples of all of these, we have eCFR, which is very frequently used. It's an online version of 19 CFR. Other online links to multi-format versions, the most prominent being GovInfo.gov. We'll see an example of that as well. And as we said just a second ago, hard copy, which in today's day and age really isn't necessary. For a quick trade tip, the U.S. Government Printing Office, the GPO, is the primary source of these multi-formatted versions of 19 CFR, which can be accessed in PDF form, XML, and others. That's extensible markup language specific to the internet. Let's have a visual of 19 CFR, but in this eCFR format, as we see in our slide title. It's just an excerpt, but a good representation of what is available. We'll start at the very top, Electronic Code of Federal Regulations, Title 19, as we've said a bunch of times now, Chapter 1. As we saw just a moment ago, in that Chapter 1, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Department of Homeland Security, Department of the Treasury, the government entities that are responsible for enforcing Title 19 of eCFR. Just as an excerpt, and important to point out, these are hyperlinks. So if we are an importer, a customs broker, a student for that matter researching a project on global trade, We can determine the heading that we're most interested in, click on that link, and off we go to that subject. We should also point out that this is not a subscription-based service. Nobody has to pay for this. The U.S. taxpayer pays for it with their tax dollars, and it's available via the internet. If we had questions around the entry of merchandise, we'd click under that table of contents heading 141.0 to 141.13. A couple of important ones: the entry process, any special entry procedures, a subject that we've spoken of a number of times now, warehouse and re-warehouse entries and withdrawals, goods going in and out of a bonded facility. That's 144.0 to 144.42. We also see foreign trade zones. This is an excerpt. The entire list, of course, would be available online. But as we noted, it's great to be an expert on every single facet of importing into the United States, but a little bit unrealistic. We want to understand what are the resources, where are they found, and how are they structured by part, table of contents, and headings, so we can go and click on the areas that we need to study. This is an excerpt from eCFR. We'll note in our title, Title 19, Chapter 1, Part 142, which deals with, as we see in the center of the page, the entry process. We clicked on the actual website on the table of contents heading, entry process, which is 142.0 to 142.52, and this is what it took us to. That's how it works. We have definitions, timing for filing entry, entry documentation required, bond requirements, everything around, in this instance, Subpart A, entry documentation. Really, we're talking about a series of hyperlinks. We just need to know, as we said a moment ago, where this information is available, how it's structured, and how to get to what we're looking for. Another great example, another source of information noted in our title, is an excerpt from the search tool GovInfo.gov. It's a search tool. And what we did here was to go to that search field we see at the very top and typed in 19 CFR Chapter 1, Part 141. This is what appeared, which, as we see in the lower center of our slide, relates to liability of importer for duties. We picked that fairly randomly, but once again, using that search tool, we can type in anything we like. What we wanted to illustrate here is that down the bottom of the page, and we spoke of this just a bit ago, we can click on a PDF format, an XML format, gain more detail, or share a link with somebody else. In our work, we oftentimes download the PDF format, but it doesn't have to be that way. That's the point. There are multiple formats through which one can work in GovInfo. And just to be thorough, it's govinfo.gov. We clicked on the PDF button to get to the link to 19 CFR 141.1. We're not going to go through all of this. It's just an illustration. But it has to do with Subpart A, liability for duties and requirement to enter merchandise. Pretty important stuff for an importer to understand. A couple of things to point out as it relates to means of payment, because we're going to be talking about that in upcoming sections: automated clearinghouse, periodic monthly statement, etc. While we're here, let's point out an importer or his agent may pay customs by using any of the applicable means provided in 24.1. We're talking about ACH, periodic monthly statement, etc. Methods of payment: an importer may pay duties either directly to customs, whether or not a licensed customs broker is used, or, a subject we'll be talking about as well, through a licensed customs broker. That means that the broker pays on behalf of the importer, and then the importer pays. Customs duties we're talking about. To reiterate, we're not here to study this subject just yet. We will come back to it. It's illustrative of how we can use GovInfo, in this case, via the PDF links. It's just a good tool to have and know how to use. We'll stop here, but we're not done with 19 CFR. In fact, we haven't even got started yet. Upon our return, it will be excerpts of parts and headings from 19 CFR Chapter 1. See you then.